This hour is brought to you by Jeremy Temple Law Office of Bloomington. Personal injury, criminal, business, whatever you need, Jeremy Temple Law Office will get you taken care of.
Well, we're coming to your city. Gonna play our guitars and sing you a country song. We'll all be flying higher than a jetliner. And if you want a little bang in your yin-yang, come along.
Well, come on. Welcome aboard the Indiana Sports Beat with Coy O'Leary coming to you on this Monday, April 27th. Thanks a lot for joining us. Jim Coyle with you. Todd O'Leary as always. Jake's at the wheel keeping us on track. On the program today, Mike DeCourcy from the Sporting News, Fox, and the Big Ten Network will join us. Matt Taylor from the Colts. We're going to talk about some draft results as the NFL draft took place over the last few days, the Basketball Hall of Fame, all kinds of stuff, Todd O'Leary. Last Dance was on again last night. Wake Forest possibly looking at John Beilein. There's a lot of stuff going on, man.
Yeah, I mean, finally there's starting to be some movement in the college basketball coaching ranks and among the big-time Division I schools. And I've been saying for a while, I can't believe there wasn't one big move made. Like I was shocked no schools were making any moves. But, boy, what a tough time for John Beilein to step in that. I mean, recruiting will be a nightmare, and your first introduction to a bunch of these kids will be on a Zoom call most likely. And it's just, it's interesting. But I mean, I don't understand that fix. I mean, Danny Manning's been there for a fairly short amount of time, and then you're going to bring in a coach that's almost 70 years old. It seems like just a quick fix type of thing. But
yeah, it's Wake Forest, obviously a program that has not had much success for a long, long time. But so you get a name. Which Danny Manning was a name too. So a name only brings you so much, but. You just mentioned the guy's going to be 70. I mean, you talk about recruiting. And
he's recruiting right in the middle of North Carolina and Duke. I mean, like, I don't care who you bring in there. It's going to be a battle to steal any big-time recruits away from those schools. I mean, heck, you're less than an hour away from those schools.
Oh, what are you talking about? It couldn't be tough to recruit against Mike Krzyzewski and Roy Williams. I mean, how hard could that be?
I mean, it's just recruiting against Nike and Adidas. I mean, how difficult could that be? It's not that tough.
Craziness. The NFL draft, of course, been taking place over the last few days. 7 straight years now, an IU player's been drafted. Simon Stepanak goes to the Pack. Green Bay Packers. He'll be on with us tomorrow, by the way. But another offensive lineman from Indiana heading to the NFL. Also, Nick Westbrook, also signed by Tennessee. Jalen Hurts picked up by Philadelphia, which that's bad news for Nate Sudfeld, former IU quarterback, who's the backup in Philly. But I don't think they're picking up Hurts to be a backup.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think we may see more teams try the old Taysom Hill type backup quarterback / special teams guy / wide receiver. Throw some goofy plays in where you've got more than one guy on the offense that can throw the ball and do some things. I mean, when it was many years ago when you had teams trying the little slot receiver that was a short little fast guy that wouldn't be your typical. I mean, look at every wide receiver they talked about.
Mitchell Page would stick up and say, "Hey man, why are you talking about me like it?"
Seriously, but I mean, it's true. Like it became a trend, and it wouldn't. I don't think
New England made that position unprofessional. What's his Edelman? Oh gosh, I can't think of his name.
Edelman. Yes. Right.
Gee whiz, they've been doing that for a long time.
They've been doing it for a long time. The Colts did the same thing. I mean, they added, and then it seemed like everybody tried to do it, and then all of a sudden, it's a thing. Well, I don't think this will become that big a thing, but as you see offenses like Kansas City and New Orleans and those offenses that are creative and use different looks and get different kinds of players in motion and doing stuff, I think you'll probably see more teams go to that. Not as many as the slot receiver, but yeah, I mean, Jalen Hurts will go there, I'm sure. And, he's a person that I have zero tie to Alabama or Oklahoma or any of that. Actually, I can't stand Alabama football. But you have to. I respect that kid and what he's done and his attitude, and I root for him like heck. I mean, I hate it for Nate Sudfeld, but I hope he gets picked up, somewhere else. But man, it was the year for linemen in the draft. It was the year for wide receivers in the draft. It was also the year for people picking up backup quarterbacks that were kind of shocking. Shocking might not be the word, but interesting moves. I mean, Green Bay did it. The Colts did it. Philadelphia did it. There was a ton of guys that it was kind of interesting on the pickups they had.
I think Nate Sudfeld gets picked up somewhere. He's got that enough experience. He's kind of in that nice pocket where he's not been in the league too long. He's got great experience, so he's valuable somewhere. And on one of these 32 teams, somebody needs an experienced backup quarterback, because we see too many times. Philadelphia was a perfect case. They won a Super Bowl with a backup quarterback. So having a backup is important. I think he'll find a landing spot. He's just a solid quarterback.
And being there in that offense, I mean, Doug Peterson's a kind of a creative, offensive mind as that coach. And, I can see Sudfeld being one of those guys that is a backup in the league for 10, 12, 13 years and then becomes an offensive coordinator and then a head coach. I mean, that's kind of the pedigree of what a guy like him is able to accomplish. But you know what? Don't write off his career, because, he could, just like you said, you never know when the injury is going to hit somewhere, and he's going to be right back there.
Man, hopefully the facilities are going to open up here soon. You mentioned that, I think Friday, possibly.
Yeah, they talked about the NBA. I talked about the NBA allowing them to open up the practice facilities in the states where they, this Friday, there's going to be a lot of states that loosen the stay-at-home order. And, once the NBA, it's kind of like when the NBA shut everything down, all the other sports started to shut everything down. And when they open it back up, I think you'll see a lot of facilities start to open back up for these colleges.
I got nowhere to go.
Yeah.
So I'm staying. I was going to stay safe. Trace Jackson Davis' brother, Taven Jackson. I talked about him earlier. 2022 quarterback. What the athletic ability in that family. I mean, My goodness gracious. You're talking about two completely different sports at a high level. That's just, it's when you see that, you're getting an incredible athlete.
Well, I mean, if you watch the draft, which most people did because there wasn't a lot else on, how many times did you see them talk about somebody whose brother already plays at LSU and his other brother played at LSU and his mom played basketball somewhere and his dad played football somewhere else? I mean, it was, to see the families go through this stuff was incredible. And, it's a thing when you've got someone and they're roughly 4 years apart. So, I mean, there's a decent enough difference that they weren't, Trace couldn't just absolutely beat up on him all the time. But I mean, I'll bet he got a lot better playing against his older, bigger, stronger brother a lot.
You see that all the time. I mean, look at the Zeller brothers. I mean,
look at Jordan. Jordan talks about his brother Larry. If he didn't have him, he wouldn't be half the player he is.
All the time. He's the Blackmans, just those guys that have those kids. And when you're the last guy in line, you've had some greatness in front of you, man.
Yeah, no doubt.
The Gordons, the Blackmans. There's some families in Indiana that just
Zellers. Zellers are decent.
Can you imagine growing up in that household? 7-footers?
Imagine trying to feed that household? No.
Oh, my gosh. Still today, imagine trying to feed that household. It's probably crazy.
No, I can't. What do you think the conversation's like every time Larry Jordan hears Michael say he wouldn't have been the player he was? You think he just dials him up and goes, "Hey, how about a check? How about a little something over here for the effort?"
I'm sure he's probably okay.
He's probably taking care of it.
Yeah, he's probably going to go okay situation. But it is so cool watching that and the coolest thing is watching Michael Jordan. He's not pulling any punches. He's telling you what he thought. They were talking about Isaiah.
How do you think he feels about Isaiah?
I can't
figure it out. I can't quite figure it out.
Oh boy, that was my thing to bring up, man. That still to this day it pisses them off, and I get it. It's like, hey, we respected you when you were beating us. How about a little turnaround is fair play? And that whole bad boys thing, it's kind of fading. It's cool and all, but you know what? They were kind of a-holes at the end of the day.
Oh, they're not kind of. I mean, there's no one outside of Detroit like that team. I don't care. I mean, I'm from Indianapolis and I was a Pacers fan, and I still like the Bulls, even though, I wanted the Pacers to win, but when they didn't, I sure wanted the Bulls to win. And I watched Jordan and all those guys all the time. Nobody liked Detroit. Like that. If you didn't live in Detroit, nobody liked Detroit. I'm sure Ryan from Michigan is going to be hitting us up here soon about about the Detroit Pistons and all that, but man, when you look at what they were able to accomplish, you have to respect it. This is the interesting part. I know we talked about this off the air, but my kids weren't even born during that time period, and so watching that last night and seeing how physical they played, my kids were getting fired up, like, you can't do that, like just screaming at the TV, and it was. It was interesting to have them look at that because, in today's world, half the stuff those guys did, they would have not only been kicked out of the game, they'd have probably had some, legal battles going on.
Oh, no doubt. I mean, it's just funny, but I'm just loving these stories and hearing it. But watching Michael Jordan tell these things with the same ferocity today that he probably had 25, however long ago it's been. But it's like, oh, no doubt about that one. And it still bothers them. It's just funny how and it's professionalism. And I think that's the biggest thing that irks those guys is they cross the line of professionalism. And they're serious about being professionals in their sports.
Yeah, the no handshake thing is, it is what it is. I'm sure it just seems like they're making a bigger deal out of something that's not that big a deal. Jordan, here's the thing. Like when guys act like that, it just makes Jordan and their teams look that much better. Like like they should appreciate those guys acting like idiots because it makes them look that much better.
Well, he mentioned that as much last night. Yeah. He goes, "Hey, it's all the better for us."
He said it's sportsmanship. That's just what it is.
And you could tell it meant a lot to Michael Jordan to be spoke of in the same breath with Larry Bird and Magic Johnson because he said it. He came out and just said it. And again, it just shows you that competitive nature of these guys.
Yeah. Oh, well, I don't think anyone questions Michael Jordan's competitive nature.
No.
If they did, all they have to do is watch this show.
Keon Brooks' younger brother getting interest from Indiana. I noticed that. I forget his first name, but he's younger and he's getting some attention. We'll see how that goes, but we'll let Alec Lassie from the Hoosier keep up on that stuff. But make sure you go to thehoosier.com, get signed up, complete coverage of the Indiana Hoosiers there. But on the program today, Mike DeCourcy, looking forward to talking to Mike. The funny thing is, I'm going to tell him, my goal was to not have him on, and I was going to see how long we could go with having different guests until I was talking about this piece he wrote the other day. I'm like, it sucks not having him on. He's too good to not have on. So yeah. I'm like, I got to call Mike. I got to get him back on. So because there's so much coming up. You got the NCAA voting on the instant eligibility on May 20th on whether that's going to be huge. What's if that happens and they do that? Wow, the next day, what's that transfer portal going to look like?
Insanity. Surely it wouldn't be an immediate impact, but who knows? You never know.
In a normal circumstance, completely agree with you. Just because of today's climate, who knows what they're going to do?
Yeah, if that's the case, I think a lot of what you're saying, I think there would be a lot of transfers going back closer to home. Just a lot of kids. Sense. Yeah, a lot of kids transferring. If you got a lot of kids that are from, way down south and they're playing at schools like Minnesota or North Dakota or places like that, I could see a lot more transfers to a local school.
Matt Taylor, play-by-play man for the Indianapolis Colts, is going to join us today to talk about the draft over the weekend as well. Mike DeCourcy from Sporting News. Up next, here on Indiana Sports Beat, coming to you from the Golf Club and Eagle Point Studios, powered by Rivals. Back with more right after this. Hello, everybody. Jim Coyle from Indiana Sports Beat. When I'm not covering the Hoosiers, you can find me at Bubba's 33 in Clarksville, located on the northeast corner of I-65 at Veterans Parkway. Bubba's 33 has hand-tossed pizzas, bold burgers, and ice-cold beer from a select list of local craft brewers. An incredible food selection, all made fresh daily. Whether you're meeting the team for that post-win meal in the family dining area or meeting friends for happy hour to watch the game on one of Bubba's 50 TVs. Bubba's 33 in Clarksville. Pizza, burgers, beer.
We all want a winning smile for those championship photos, and that's exactly what you will get at Reynolds Family Dentistry in Sellersburg. Reynolds Family Dentistry has been serving the dental needs of Hoosier families for over 30 years. Let Doctors Roger and Jay Reynolds take care of your family. Just off of I-65 at 809 South Indiana Avenue in Sellersburg. Call 812-246-3368. That's Reynolds Family Dentistry, 812-246-3368.
I'm Ryan Shaddy, and I'm a Hoosier. As a toddler, you could always find me running around in a cream and crimson onesie and a red IU hat reminiscent of those worn during the world-famous William Tell timeout, shouting, "Go Hoosiers!" Like many other alum, I chose to make Bloomington my home. As a civic and alumni leader, I have become very knowledgeable about our community and would love to share my insights with you as your realtor. Find me on Facebook or call or text me, Ryan Shaddy, with FC Tucker Bloomington Realtors at 765-623-9093.
Now that warm weather has arrived, it's time to hit the links, and there's no better place than the Golf Club at Eagle Point in Bloomington. Voted best golf course by the readers of the Bloomington Herald-Times, the Golf Club at Eagle Point is under new ownership, has new fairways and bunkers, and it's open to the public. When the round's over, there's cold beer and a full menu at the Eagle Point Pub and Bistro. Call 812-824-1100 to make a tee time. That's 812-824-1100. The Golf Club at Eagle Point in Bloomington.
This is Jim Coyle from Indiana Sports Beat with Coyle and Leary. Indiana Sports Beat is now a part of the Rivals Network. You can go to thehoosier.com to sign up. It's free. Catch the show there each day live or at your convenience. You can also like or follow us on Facebook, follow the show's rebroadcast anywhere you podcast. If we're not on a radio station where you live, we should be. Let your local station know they need to carry Indiana Sports Beat with Coyle and Leary, or simply go to thehoosier.com.
Some of the best sounds you'll ever hear are generic, safe, effective, even money-saving, just like FDA-approved generic drugs. Even if they don't come in the exact same color or shape as their brand name equivalents, they have the same key ingredients and go through a rigorous review process. Talk to your doctor or pharmacist today and visit fda.gov/generic drugs. Generics are safe, effective, and can save you money. You'll like the sound of that.
You're on the line with Jamal Meeks, former Indiana Hoosier, number 23, 1992. And I'm on the beat with Jim Coyle.
Today's guest is brought to you by Reynolds Family Dentistry of Sellersburg. You need $1 million smile for those championship photos, and that's exactly what you'll get with Reynolds Family Dentistry.
In the desert, you can't remember your name, 'cause there ain't no one for to give you no pain.
Welcome back to Indiana Sports Beat with Coyle Leary, coming to you on this Monday from the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios, joined now by one of our absolute fan favorites, Mike DeCourcy from the Sporting News, Fox and the Big Ten Network. Mr. DeCourcy, how are you, sir?
I'm well, Jim. How are you?
Doing fine. Todd's here with us. I told him a minute ago, so I was wanting to see how long I could go without having Mike on in this time of getting different guests, but it was too much because I said he's too good of a guest to not have him on. So that's why I reached out. A great piece again on the other day. Your stuff is always so timely and important, and I'm like, we got to talk to him about it, man. But
so what you're saying is I'm the functional equivalent of a high cholesterol food. You really want it, but you try to put it off for as long as you can.
Gotta have it, man. But some great stuff out
is what I am.
Oh man, now you're
everybody's favorite food. Everybody's favorite food. Pizza.
Supreme, and supreme at that. Name, image, likeness, transferring, allowing kids to return. If not, there's so many things that the NCAA needs to address, Mike, and that are being addressed. But we're in the middle of this weird time of it all that really makes it just a weird situation for everybody, especially the kids involved.
Yeah, I think that most athletes are proceeding under the belief that either the transfer rule will be changed in time for the next college athletic season, whenever that is, hopefully on time in the fall and spring. But I think there's a feeling that if that doesn't happen, then I'll get a waiver. And so I think that has contributed to the volume of transfers. And also, I think what's a little different, what seems to be a little different, I'd have to go and look at it, and it takes like 5 days to look at it, is a year ago I did, and I looked at all the transfers that were on Jeff Goodman's list at Stadium and broke down every single one. And honestly, almost all of them, I mean, not every one, but such a vast majority of them were guys who averaged like 2 points a game or 4 points a game. It feels like and maybe it's just an anecdotal thing, it feels like there are more significant players that are moving this year. I don't know that for a fact. But when I see a kid like Luther Muhammad leave Ohio State, I'm so baffled as to that development that I wonder if there's something different.
Yeah, I mean, a great example of that. I mean, I think Michigan is kind of dealing with the same thing. I mean, the David DeJulius to me was the one where I was like, I mean, this kid. There was games this year I kind of thought he should have started, and I think maybe he might have thought that also. But I mean, seeing a guy like him who you could almost guarantee is going to be the starting point guard next season at a school like Michigan, and has put his time in. I agree with you. There's some other things going on and some other factors involved in these things. But if that opens up, I mean, Jim and I were talking about this earlier. If that opens up to where there's no sit out time, and a kid could transfer and have immediate playing time at another school. I mean, I see that as just opening up. We'll see kids leaving that you just are shocked at that are leaving a certain school. And I don't know. I'm trying to not be pessimistic about it. I just don't see how that's going to be a positive for college basketball in general.
Todd, I've written about this in the past, and what's interesting is that like I'm one of the few voices. I think John Rothstein, from a national standpoint, or John Rothstein is of a similar viewpoint, although I don't know whether his reasoning is the same as mine. But the overwhelming number of national voices who speak on college basketball are on the other side of that fence. And what's interesting is that I have presented a very, very strong case for my side, and no one ever challenges me on it, because
Agreed.
The reality is that I'm right. But they just look at it from a baseline of it's not fair. And honestly, it's not unfair. The excuse they give is, well, if you're like a student journalist, or like I was a DJ at my school radio station, okay, and if I had chosen to transfer, then I could immediately be a DJ on the next school radio station. But it's not really the same thing.
No, it's
First
not
of
even
all,
close.
when an athlete transfers, in terms of like if an athlete goes from, say, Indiana State, and I can't think of any famous players who might have done that, there's nothing that stops the player who leaves the Hoosiers to go play for the Sycamores for being a member of the basketball team. He or she is allowed to be a member of the basketball team. They are just not allowed to compete intercollegiately, but they are able to get all the rights and privileges that go with being a member of the basketball team. So I don't think that argument holds up. My argument is that I will not ever support something that is a worse deal for the athlete. And it's a worse deal because you're in a circumstance where you are being you're taken from a system and a coach that you know, and put into a system and a coach that you don't know, and you are then immediately asked to play. And you think that's great, but it takes an adjustment period with most players. As well, academically, you lose credits. You lose credit hours on almost every transfer. It's not universal, but it's pretty close. And so the year in residence gives you the opportunity to adjust both academically and athletically. So it leads to better outcomes athletically and better outcomes academically. So how can you say that it's better for a transfer to be eligible immediately?
And right along with you with that, like, you can look at the big time recruits, the guys who are, 5 stars and even big 4 stars, and they go to a school and they're expected to contribute right off the bat and contribute immediately. But what about the guys who are maybe a little less? There's a lot more guys who are 3 stars and lower that you don't really know of that much. And if you've got those guys that commit to a school based on, several factors, the coaches, the campus, the academic things that are offered there, and also who is there and what players are there and what is my ability to be able to play there. Every player doesn't pick a school thinking I'm going to go right in and average 20 a game. He might say, okay, well, they've got a bunch of guys that are going to be graduating next year, and my playing time my sophomore year should really ramp up and be a lot bigger. And then all of a sudden now they're allowed to bring in 7 guys over the top of you. And I think they're going to create, for the guys who are, not the very top 25 guys in the country, but the guys who are rated, 25 to 150, I think those guys are going to suffer more. The Keon Brooks guys of the world that are at a place like Kentucky, all of a sudden now, he's in a situation where he's going to have a whole bunch of guys come in right over the top of him right now. And I think that's what's going to struggle with when they talk about unfair. I think they're setting these kids up for a situation that's going to be more unfair than what they have now.
One of the things that I have always liked about the year in residence rule is that if Mike DeCourcy is a point guard who's getting 15 minutes a game at let's say at Penn State, and I decide that I want to transfer to Pitt. Well, okay, so what has to happen for Coach Capel at Pitt to take me is he has to look at me and he has to say in a year he can, I have to put a year worth of free education and 1/13 of my roster into this guy, and he can't play a single game for me. So I got to be really sure that this guy is going to make me better, is going to make my team better, and then I'm going to have a real use for him. But if I'm at Penn State and I'm averaging 15 minutes a game, and Jeff Capel needs 15 minutes a game, he can take me and say, okay, yeah, absolutely, you'll play great. And I'm not saying Jeff would do this. Yeah, you'll play lots. Right. And then I come in and I play 15 minutes a game. And what recourse do I have? I have no recourse because you're only allowed to do this once. So it's a bad system. And the disappointing thing about it is to see so many people in my business advocating for a bad system. I have not seen a good argument in favor of this. I've seen tons of good arguments in favor of name, image, and likeness. I saw tons of good arguments in favor of cost of attendance, but this is one that I've never seen a good argument in favor of, and yet the vast majority continue to just side on that side of the fence, and I don't think it's going to be good for either the athletes or the sport. The sport is something that's very important to me, but I start with the athletes. I want them to have a great experience, and I think fewer of them will under this circumstance.
Mike, you bring up the name, image, likeness, another big issue coming up. One of the things that scares me about that is the ability that they're looking at of allowing boosters to actively engage with athletes. What prevents, say, Mark Cuban from having his own minor league team at Indiana, if that is the case?
The one thing that would prevent it is that the NCAA will have a panel that judges whether or not these circumstances are fair market value. So, in other words, if you pay, let's say you're in so Indianapolis. So in Indianapolis, you pay Victor Oladipo X number of dollars to help pitch your car dealers. Your car dealership. Well, then you couldn't then, for the purpose of recruiting a great quarterback to one of the area colleges or point guard or whatever, you can't then pay X times X or X plus X to that college athlete. And you might even have to, when you think about it, because Victor's a pro and all that, you might even have to establish fair market value, pay X minus Y, say, so that it's a lower figure. So it is still a complicated issue. I was really surprised that was that according to the AP report, I was surprised that was allowed or will be allowed. I did not expect that part. That was the part that I thought they'd fight to keep out. That active and established boosters would be excluded. However, I suspect that the reason that was included was that they don't want people to not be boosters because they want to help get the athlete or whatever. I don't think they want people to say, no, I'm not going to help sponsor your athletic program because I'm really more interested in making sure that you get all the best players. So I will help you in that way. I think they still want those people on board buying ads in the programs or on the scoreboard or on the television broadcasts or whatever.
Yeah, the only scary part, I read that same AP release, and the scary part I had with that is in establishing that fair market value. I understand they're going to have a group of people that specifically monitor those things, but still there's a little bit of a gray area involved in that. And we've seen the NCAA doesn't do great at dealing with gray areas. They're not really fair in how they deal with some schools versus others. And so I hate it when there's not any black and white. This is exactly what the rule is. This is what they can get. And that's the bottom line, because, teams are going to stretch that, that loophole as much as possible. And, I think I'm for it. I'm with you on this one. Like, I think this is something that they have to do. Otherwise, the G League /NBA / whatever new league is going to come along is just going to eventually try to squeeze out the NCAA men's basketball or basketball in general. But I think it needs to be a little bit more strict. Otherwise, the fair market value for a guy playing at St. John's all of a sudden in New York is going to be a lot different than the fair market value playing in Minnesota. So it's just, I don't know how they can truly keep track of that.
It's an interesting point, certainly. And there was a time when St. John's had an advantage recruiting wise when they had no dorms. They had no dorms at St. John's. It was a full commuter school for years and years. And they built dorms, 20 years ago, maybe something like that. And it took away their advantage, because for a while they could pay fair market value for housing in New York, which was exorbitant and still is. And so the athletes would get enormous checks, and then they'd sort of all stuff themselves into one small space, and they'd all make out great. It was a big help for St. John's for a long time. But I think the other thing that was originally in the proposals, it wasn't covered in the AP story, and I suspect it's probably still a part of it, was that you would not be allowed to use this name, image, and likeness component for either recruiting or retention. So you can't go to a guy who's thinking about, do I want to play college another year, or do I want to enter the NBA draft? You can't go to him and say, oh, we'll get you another deal. You can't. I mean, that was originally part of the proposal. Again, I didn't see it in this story. I suspect it's still probably baked into whatever that is that they are going to examine and perhaps pass, because it is important that it becomes it not become institutional. They don't want this to be something that they are actively engaged in as an institution, because then if they do that, then there are Title IX implications. This has to be strictly a player-driven circumstance. I go out and I try to maximize my value as a student athlete. It can't be my institution is trying to either secure my arrival or my retention, because if they do that, then at that point Title IX becomes an issue, and what we expect will be an imbalance. I do believe that there will be, as was the case with Sabrina Ionescu. She would have had significant value as an Oregon athlete under the name, image, and likeness deal, but I do expect that there will be an imbalance, football, men's basketball versus all other campus sports, in regards to what the player's value will be for name, image, and likeness.
Then there's the final wrinkle is if individual colleges, it's going to be allowed that they make the determination of whether or not to include athletic apparel companies. Because you look at Kansas, who's got this $10.5 billion deal with Adidas, and then you've got the haves and the have-nots in there. That's a big disparity.
It's really it's going to be interesting and a challenge in that regard, because Under Armour at UCLA, you mentioned Adidas at Kansas, and of course Louisville. You look at Kentucky with Nike, Duke with Nike, and it will be interesting to see if that becomes problematic, because we know that over the years that there have been athletes who have had some affiliation through their AAU team with one of the particular companies, and in many occasions they have continued that affiliation on through the college that they choose. But also we've seen lots that have said, that this is who got me through to here, and yeah, I'd like to stay with them, but I really need to go to this place, and so maybe I'll get back with them if I'm a pro, but for now I got to go to this place, and they are a different shoe school. So I do think that will be interesting. If you're at Kansas, do exclusively recruit Adidas athletes? I don't think so. Too many great athletes under other banners. Do you agree to recruit a guy who's been a Nike athlete and who wants to continue to wear Nike shoes in particular? I mean, obviously you couldn't have a different branded uniform, but it makes for an interesting circumstance that the colleges are going to have to deal with. But they have had at least 2 years warning trying to figure this out, and they speak to those apparel companies all the time. So it's up to them to figure out how to deal with it.
Hey, Mike, one thing in reading through that, and maybe I just haven't gotten deep enough into it to see where they discussed it, but from the athlete's perspective, they're not allowed to hire sports agents and that kind of stuff, or they lose their amateurism and are not eligible in the NCAA anymore. But in dealing with, like you talked about, in dealing directly with, this name, image, likeness with particular companies and individuals, are they allowed to hire agents to handle that for them?
Yeah, that was not covered in the story, and I had not seen any indication along those lines whether or not they're going to have to deal with this on their own with no marketing rep or whatever. That's a real challenge, because obviously the young athletes could very easily be taken advantage of. That's problematic, and I think that's something that they'll have to straighten out.
Do the schools set up something where they have their own department, maybe?
When every sports agency in the country, every sports agent that there is that helps these kids, they also either do that themselves or have a department within their company that does that for these guys. So now I can see this opening up for kind of a middleman in between the actual sports agent, and it just opens up. I'm for it. I know you're for it, like you said. I just don't know logistically how you make it work and so that it's fair for everybody, because I don't know how you're going to keep this stuff. If these kids are going and negotiating contracts on their own, you're right. Like they're not going to be capable of putting themselves in a good position. We'll have kids that are committed to a certain place until they're 85 years old and not even have realized what they signed. But yeah,
that's a good point.
It just opens up so much stuff.
Yeah, and when the Rice Commission, I guess it was 2 years ago now, came down with their recommendations, I was a little disappointed that their recommendation on the agent element and the subsequent rule that was put in place, I felt like, look, I know, and Todd and Jim, that there are agreements that are well in place with a lot of young athletes between them and agencies. And so I thought, just put it out on the open, because we know it's happening. And so what's the point of having them, like, if they want to enter the draft, you sign with an agent during that time, and then as soon as you go back to college, you have to nuke the agreement. It's silly. It doesn't make any sense. I know in large part it's coaches don't want to deal with agents, and I get that. But the reality is that even at that level, they're still dealing with them anyway. Whether it's having to keep them off your campus so that they don't recruit your players away. And in a lot of cases, it might make for a better arrangement so that the agents doesn't feel that urgency to pull the player out of school before somebody else gets him.
Totally agree.
That he might just say, I know, the kid knows, the coach knows he's not ready for the NBA, and we have an agreement that's in place that I'm going to be his agent, so we're all good. So let's proceed with this and let the kid develop, instead of, I got to pull that kid out of school right now, because if I leave him there for another 12 months, he's going to meet some other agent, and that agent's going to romance him in some way, shape, or form, and then I'm going to lose that client, and maybe he turns into something. So I think I think it would really be much better if they just were allowed to have representation and allowed to retain it and just go from there. I know it would create hassles for coaches. That's why they get the big bucks. It's the only answer I can give you.
Mike, man, I cannot thank you as always for joining us. You're just a walking encyclopedia of everything that we care about, and it's just incredible having you on, seriously. And you're always working on a piece of greatness. What next is coming out for you?
I don't really have a definitive plan at this point. We've been so focused on the draft. I had a whole truckload of coverage on the draft last week, along with the rest of the Sporting News crew. And I've got some ideas that I'm going to kick around, but I'm not putting them out there for anybody else to do. I really don't have anything that's actually in the works right now, but I'm getting, now that I'm off football mode and back into everything mode, mostly basketball, I'll come up with a few things. But if you want to read my draft coverage at TSN Mike, I had some fun things on there. The Sporting News draft coverage for the NFL was really terrific. I was really proud to be a part of it in what's a difficult time for everybody in the media business. I thought our crew did a really bang up job.
Make sure you go check it out. There's nothing but the best, and that is exactly what Mike DeCourcy, the best. We appreciate you so much, Mike. Thank you for your time and joining us.
Jim and Todd, it's always a delight. Thank you so much.
Thank you, buddy.
Thank you. The great Mike DeCourcy from the Sporting News, from Fox and the Big Ten Network as well, man. He has always loved having him on. It is just a discussion. They're always fun and engaging, but most importantly, informative.
Yeah, no doubt. He knows what's going on and everything. I don't know how he does it.
We got a lot more coming up. Matt Taylor from the Colts Play-by-Play Man is going to join us, talk about some draft day, all the draft day stuff for the Colts, and actually NFL. We'll talk about the IU guys as well, but stay tuned. You're listening to Indiana Sports Beat with Coyle Leary. We're coming to you from the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios, powered by Rivals. Back with more after this.
Spend your lives in sin and misery in the house of the rising sun.
Hello, everybody. Jim Coyle from Indiana Sports Beat. When I'm not covering the Hoosiers, you can find me at Bubba's 33 in Clarksville, located on the northeast corner of I-65 at Veterans Parkway. Bubba's 33 has hand-tossed pizzas, bold burgers, and ice-cold beer from a select list of local craft brewers. An incredible food selection, all made fresh daily. Whether you're meeting the team for that post-win meal in the family dining area or meeting friends for happy hour to watch the game on one of Bubba's 50 TVs. Bubba's 33 in Clarksville. Pizza, burgers, beer.
We all want a winning smile for those championship photos, and that's exactly what you will get at Reynolds Family Dentistry in Sellersburg. Reynolds Family Dentistry has been serving the dental needs of Hoosier families for over 30 years. Let Doctors Roger and Jay Reynolds take care of your family. Just off of I-65 at 809 South Indiana Avenue in Sellersburg. Call 812-246-3368. That's Reynolds Family Dentistry, 812-246-3368.
I'm Ryan Shaddy, and I'm a Hoosier. As a toddler, you could always find me running around in a cream and crimson onesie and a red IU hat reminiscent of those worn during the world-famous William Tell timeout, shouting, "Go Hoosiers!" Like many other alum, I chose to make Bloomington my home. As a civic and alumni leader, I have become very knowledgeable about our community and would love to share my insights with you as your realtor. Find me on Facebook or call or text me, Ryan Shaddy, with FC Tucker Bloomington Realtors at 765-623-9093.
Now that warm weather has arrived, it's time to hit the links, and there's no better place than the Golf Club at Eagle Point in Bloomington. Voted best golf course by the readers of the Bloomington Herald-Times, the Golf Club at Eagle Point is under new ownership, has new fairways and bunkers, and it's open to the public. When the round's over, there's cold beer and a full menu at the Eagle Point Pub and Bistro. Call 812-824-1100 to make a tee time. That's 812-824-1100. The Golf Club at Eagle Point in Bloomington.
This is Jim Coyle from Indiana Sports Beat with Coyle and Leary. Indiana Sports Beat is now a part of the Rivals Network. You can go to thehoosier.com to sign up. It's free. Catch the show there each day live or at your convenience. You can also like or follow us on Facebook, follow the show's rebroadcast anywhere you podcast. If we're not on a radio station where you live, we should be. Let your local station know they need to carry Indiana Sports Beat with Coyle and Leary, or simply go to thehoosier.com.
Some of the best sounds you'll ever hear are generic, safe, effective, even money-saving, just like FDA-approved generic drugs. Even if they don't come in the exact same color or shape as their brand name equivalents, they have the same key ingredients and go through a rigorous review process. Talk to your doctor or pharmacist today and visit fda.gov/generic drugs. Generics are safe, effective, and can save you money. You'll like the sound of that.
Hey, this is Jordan Halls, former Indiana Hoosier. Keep up with Indiana sports on Indiana Sports Beat.
Welcome back to Indiana Sports Beat with Coyle Leary coming to you from the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios, powered by Rivals. Go to thehoosier.com, get signed up for free coverage on the Hoosiers. There's also a premium portion there as well. But, man, that was an incredible segment, as it always is with Mike. I mean, there's so much to cover. We could just go on and on and on talking about that stuff. I mean, there's no end, Todd. I think you're muted.
Sorry.
That's all right.
No, you're exactly right. I mean, it is. That's a conversation that you could go back and forth. And like Mike's one of the guys that I really, respect and like to hear what he has to say about it, because he seems to come up with a, kind of a different angle or perspective or way to look at it than what I think is obvious to just the normal person, and
presents it in a way that makes nothing but sense.
It's fair, like he said. I mean, it's hard to argue against some of the things that he says about how to do this stuff, and you just wonder, how are there not people? If it's not him, how are there not people within the NCAA room or board or whomever's sitting there discussing that kind of have that have the same ideas or mentality, but. It just, I don't know. There's so many things that can go wrong with the name, image, likeness thing. I know it's going to happen. I know it should happen. I've always thought it was a thing that should happen. But man, it's going to be so hard to police that. It's just going to be. I don't know if we may look at this later and go that's what really brought the house down, because it's just impossible to.
That's the thing. I could sit here and talk to you for an hour and not even bring up. Not even debate the issues, just list the freaking issues that this could bring.
Right.
And you could talk for so long without even getting into a debate. That's the problem. So when you have that many variables, where the hell do you start? And how in the world could you've only got 2 hands and 10 fingers. There's going to be a lot more than 10 holes, dikes to fill.
Here's what, here, one of the things that he brought up and said was that your quote, and my quotation mark, air quotes are up, you're not going to be allowed to use this for recruiting or for retention of players. Right. That is virtually impossible.
I.e. Kansas Nike or Kansas Adidas.
All of that.
All of them, yes.
It is, and I'm not just blaming them. Like, truly, I'm not saying they would even have to try to bend the rules, because that is something that you literally, let's use an example. If Indiana wants to, or if any school in general wants to go recruit a kid, and they are not allowed to talk about that, and they're not allowed to say, hey, if you come here, we're going to get you a deal with XYZ car company, and you're going to get paid $15,000 a year off of this. And so they're not allowed to say that. You know what they can say? For the last 7 years we've had coming in here, every freshman that we have had has had a deal with XYZ car company, and they have made $15,000 a year. And so it's saying the same thing. It's just wording it different, because the NCAA is going to, quote, monitor whether you use it for recruiting or not. That's not using it for recruiting. That's stating true facts of what it is. And then, so the problem is going to be, you're going to have, Ball State University is going to be doing that, and they're going to, they're going to be telling kids that this is what happens, and you're going to, you're going to get $1,500 a month off of this. And then you're going to have Indianas of the world that are going to say you're getting $15,000 a month off of this. And then you're going to have the Kentuckys of the world. They're going to say you're going to get $150,000 a month off of this.
Yeah, there's no way you got a place like Oklahoma State. They have struggled for years. They want to be in that conversation. They're there. They're in a conference. They're in a great conference there, but they can't get football. They're right there. Basketball there. But you got a T. Boone Pickens Foundation that has more money than all of us put together. There's no way they are not going to benefit greatly in that regard.
You'll start seeing recruiting classes like Memphis had last year, or like Kentucky has every year, or Duke has. You'll start seeing these schools where they're not just bringing in one top 25 player. They're going to have 4 or 5 of the top 25 players, and you're going to know for a fact it's all has to deal with how much they're getting paid. It's not going to be constitutionally possible to or right to limit the amount, but I don't see how you can do this without limiting the amount. And then once they limit the amount, you're going to have schools breaking that. They're going to find a loophole in a way to break it.
Basketball Hall of Fame announced Tim Duncan going in. Big name.
No brainer.
Yeah, I mean, he was just – how many titles did they win, San Antonio? That's what I thought, 5. Wow. Popovich, of course, Greg Popovich from Maryville, Indiana, another Indiana guy. It's so funny how you look at the greatest of the great coaches in this sport, not just college, but pro. Greg Popovich, he's got to be in that conversation. He's from Indiana. You've got Bob Knight. You've got John Wooden. I mean, it's crazy the level of high level coaching that came from this state. Mind-boggling.
Yeah, no, there's no question about that. I don't think that would be a tough one to debate for someone else. But you don't have to sell me on it. Obviously.
We talked earlier about John Beilein. Possibly he's the leading candidate at Wake Forest. Danny Manning. I mean, I don't know at Wake Forest. What's the expectations? You mentioned earlier, first of all, bam, the first thing you got to do is turn around and compete against Duke and North Carolina. North Carolina State, too. They're ahead of the game. Right. It's like you can't turn around without bumping into somebody right in your own house that you got to recruit against.
So what's the time frame for John Beilein to turn that around?
At 70.
Yeah, I mean, I respect the heck out of what he's done. I really, really do. But what are they expecting out of him? Like, truly, do you give him 4 or 5 years? I mean, do you give him until he's 75 years old to accomplish this? I mean,
they probably will, because
I'm sure they will. But
he's shown that his first year, he was one of those guys that the first 3 years he didn't have much, and all of a sudden, boom, to a national title game. So there's that. But oh man, there was something else I was going to talk about. And I freaking forgot now. Forgot where it was. So
I'm excited to talk to Matt Taylor. I mean, the Colts draft. I think when you hear everyone talk about what teams came out of that draft the best, the Colts are in the top 3 of everybody's pick in that, and that's pretty fun and exciting.
Alan says, "Good morning, guys in B-Town. Good morning to you down there in Birdseye, Alan. We know where you are. Appreciate that." What's that?
You can't repeat it.
I can't. It's right. I cannot. But yeah, so tons going on, man. It's still lots of action happening. And then, of course, the recruiting action's still going. As we mentioned earlier, Trey Jackson Davis's brother getting a football offer. But the basketball side recruiting, how many kids are waiting for this May 20th vote on the NCAA? Now, school's going to be out, but I don't know that that's going to have any difference, make any difference whatsoever. But Mike mentioned that's why maybe you're seeing so much more of that now. They're already anticipating that this is going to happen. It's going to happen, no doubt. And he says even if they don't, they're just going to roll the dice and say, hey, maybe I'll get a
maybe the rule will change. They're betting on the fact that the rule is going to change. And, I just see it, especially from the standpoint of, where we are with this pandemic and everything that's going on. I mean, I see there being maybe not the big names that you think of, but I see there being an enormous amount of guys transferring back closer to home, which I'm not even saying that's a negative. I just think, from an overall standpoint of the number of people that could possibly transfer if they open that up without penalty, I think that number could be gigantic, like out of control.
I know something I was going to bring up. It's totally unrelated to basketball, but Dr. Fossey was asked a while back who plays him in the movie, and he said Brad Pitt, of course. Well, over the weekend, Brad Pitt played him in Saturday Night Live Open. It was kind of funny, kind of cool.
That is good.
It was hilarious. So if you haven't seen that, go back and check that out. But yeah, they do the Open and him at home, of course, and he's playing Dr. Fossey, which was just hilarious because Dr. Fossey is probably 5'0", and an older
with
guy.
No hair, with
Brad Pitt. But and at the end, Brad Pitt pulls his wig and stuff off and thanks Dr. Fossey and all the first responders and people out there. So it was pretty cool. But hopefully we're going to see some loosening up of this stuff. Todd, you mentioned the NBA facilities and what's next after that. Hopefully baseball comes around, and but that's don't get ahead of ourselves. But
it's not going to open up to the point of we're all going to run out to Pizza Hut this weekend. But I think it'll open up from the standpoint of being allowed to especially from a sports perspective, being allowed to go back to the facilities and go back to do stuff. I mean, you saw the Tom Brady thing. The whole NFL's freaking out because some guy put a story out there that Tom Brady accidentally walked into his house. And the NFL has a rule you're not allowed to go meet face to face with the coaches. So
they weren't. I don't know if they were planning on meeting face to face. He was just going to drop the materials off and he was going to pick it up. That's why he just walked in
his house.
Right. That's why he did. He thought he was just going to walk in and grab the stuff, and all of a sudden there's some dude sitting in the seat like,
and
"Hey, what's up, man?"
And you believe that?
No.
If that's the case, why didn't you just leave it out on the patio?
Exactly. Exactly. We got a lot more coming up. We'll be talking to Matt Taylor when we come back. Indianapolis Colts play-by-play guy. I guess we'll see what the draft brought the Colts. That and more. Stay tuned. You're listening to Indiana Sports Beat with Coyle Leary coming to you from the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios, powered by Rivals. Back with that and more right after this. Hello, everybody. Jim Coyle from Indiana Sports Beat. When I'm not covering the Hoosiers, you can find me at Bubba's 33 in Clarksville, located on the northeast corner of I-65 at Veterans Parkway. Bubba's 33 has hand-tossed pizzas, bold burgers, and ice-cold beer from a select list of local craft brewers. An incredible food selection, all made fresh daily. Whether you're meeting the team for that post-win meal in the family dining area or meeting friends for happy hour to watch the game on one of Bubba's 50 TVs. Bubba's 33 in Clarksville. Pizza, burgers, beer.
We all want a winning smile for those championship photos, and that's exactly what you will get at Reynolds Family Dentistry in Sellersburg. Reynolds Family Dentistry has been serving the dental needs of Hoosier families for over 30 years. Let Doctors Roger and Jay Reynolds take care of your family. Just off of I-65 at 809 South Indiana Avenue in Sellersburg. Call 812-246-3368. That's Reynolds Family Dentistry, 812-246-3368.
I'm Ryan Shaddy, and I'm a Hoosier. As a toddler, you could always find me running around in a cream and crimson onesie and a red IU hat reminiscent of those worn during the world-famous William Tell timeout, shouting, "Go Hoosiers!" Like many other alum, I chose to make Bloomington my home. As a civic and alumni leader, I have become very knowledgeable about our community and would love to share my insights with you as your realtor. Find me on Facebook or call or text me, Ryan Shaddy, with FC Tucker Bloomington Realtors at 765-623-9093.
Now that warm weather has arrived, it's time to hit the links, and there's no better place than the Golf Club at Eagle Point in Bloomington. Voted best golf course by the readers of the Bloomington Herald-Times, the Golf Club at Eagle Point is under new ownership, has new fairways and bunkers, and it's open to the public. When the round's over, there's cold beer and a full menu at the Eagle Point Pub and Bistro. Call 812-824-1100 to make a tee time. That's 812-824-1100. The Golf Club at Eagle Point in Bloomington. This is Jim Coyle from Indiana Sports Beat with Coyle and Leary. Indiana Sports Beat is now a part of the Rivals Network. You can go to thehoosier.com to sign up. It's free. Catch the show there each day live or at your convenience. You can also like or follow us on Facebook, follow the show's rebroadcast anywhere you podcast. If we're not on a radio station where you live, we should be. Let your local station know they need to carry Indiana Sports Beat with Coyle and Leary, or simply go to thehoosier.com.
Some of the best sounds you'll ever hear are generic, safe, effective, even money-saving, just like FDA-approved generic drugs. Even if they don't come in the exact same color or shape as their brand name equivalents, they have the same key ingredients and go through a rigorous review process. Talk to your doctor or pharmacist today and visit fda.gov/generic drugs. Generics are safe, effective, and can save you money. You'll like the sound of that.
Hey, it's Michael Lewis, former Indiana University player and current UCLA assistant basketball coach, and you're listening to Indiana Sports Beat.
Welcome back to Indiana Sports Beat with Coyle and Leary coming to you from the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios here on this Monday, and we are through the NFL draft and got the best guy in the world to talk about it. Matt Taylor, play-by-play man from the Colts, joining us. Matthew, how are you, brother?
I'm good. How are you guys doing this fine Monday morning?
Great. How's the baby?
Baby's good. Getting bigger every day.
starting to examine pictures, from 3 weeks ago, and it's night and day and sleeping good still. So no complaints and just incredibly blessed.
I assume that he did not declare for the draft this weekend.
Not yet. No, he's not coming out early just yet. We're still working on the footwork and the accuracy and, some of the, some of the ball skills, but I think we'll get there.
Does it feel like the day after Christmas to you? Because the draft, just all this lead up coming up to the draft, and then all of a sudden it's over, and you get to look at all your toys that you've got there and decide what you're going to do with them, and then now you got to think, oh my gosh, I got to wait all the way till next year to use any of these things.
Yeah, no, that's a great point, because you are excited because you've got all these players in here that make your team better, at least on paper, and it's exciting to see what this offense will look like now with some more dynamic playmakers like Michael Pittman and Jonathan Taylor. But yeah, I mean, in a normal year, you're like, oh man, it's kind of a bummer because we got to wait, 3-4 months to see these guys on the field. And it's even more this year because we don't know when that's going to be with all this coronavirus stuff going on. But so there's that. And then another part of it too, for me, this is kind of the point of the offseason where the offseason really kind of slows down. I mean, free agency is a big wave. Right after the Super Bowl, that's a big wave because then you're getting ready for the combine and all that. So after the draft, I mean, that's kind of like when the offseason really starts to slow down. I mean, you might get some free agents that you bring on your team to kind of help fill out your roster. I mean, I go back to June of, I think it was 2014 when the Colts signed Mike Adams. So you might have stuff like that. But for me, this is kind of when you start to map out vacation and time off and really start to get away because things really do start to slow down after the draft.
What is that you talk about, vacation? What is that?
Yeah, right. I mean, in the NFL, they've done such a good job, really the last, I say, decade of making the league a 365 sport. I mean, more people, I think just as many people are interested in the business side of the league than as there are people that play fantasy football and get excited, from the week to week stuff. I mean, our numbers on Colts.com are maybe higher this time of year in free agency and the draft than they are during the season, because I think people, once we start to get about a month into playing games, then the grind and the routine kind of sets in for fans. But they're really excited to see, who's going to make us better? Who are we going to draft? Who are free agents that we're going to bring in to kind of get us over the top? So from a content standpoint, it never slows down. Like I said, in January, you got the playoffs. February, you got the combine. March is free agency. April's heavy draft. In a normal year, May is, off-season workouts and OTAs. June is mini camp, and July is training camp. So there's something every single month of the NFL calendar.
Looking at this draft, Indianapolis did not have a first-round pick, but not having though, and still they seem to have made a splash without having a first-round pick, which is kind of tough to do.
Chris Ballard is so good at being able to maximize, his draft capital and turn that into impactful players. I mean, the last couple of years, he hasn't had a first-round pick, and it's really been no problem, at least, as we sit here and talk right now. I mean, you could argue that DeForest Buckner was their first-round pick because that was just kind of a player-to-player or player-to-pick trade to bring him in. And those were the two areas of need for the Colts heading into this offseason, two areas where you say on defense, we gave up too many big plays. On offense, we didn't have enough. So A, enter Phillip Rivers, and B, enter DeForest Buckner, because DeForest Buckner is going to give that push up front the Colts need. So that's kind of the first round angle. And then the second round, you need dynamic playmakers, and that's what the Colts did with Michael Pittman Jr., a big-bodied wide receiver out of USC, 6'4", 220 pounds, and that's just been lacking. The Colts haven't really had that, makeup from a wide receiver standpoint on the roster the last couple of years. And I went back and looked this up with Phillip Rivers. We know that he likes to take shots down the field. He likes to push the football vertically. In the last 10 years, 17 of his 20 top targets on his team have been over 6'2". I mean, the Colts last year only had one player over 6'2", and actually they had two, Eric Ebron and Mo Alie-Cox. But of course, Ebron's no longer on the team, so that left a big time void. And you love what T.Y. Hilton does, but he's just not that type of player The Colts brought in, Devin Funches last year to be that guy. It just didn't work out from an injury standpoint. So the Colts didn't mess around. They spent a lot of draft capital on bringing in somebody for the long term that's going to be able to give them consistent play with those measurables to help, box people out, go get the ball at the highest point, go get some, tough red zone catches, that kind of thing. And then maybe the most surprising pick certainly came after that when they had their second round pick. They traded up 3 spots. They go from 44 up to 41, and they trade up with the Cleveland Browns, and they select Jonathan Taylor out of Wisconsin. And it was a very surprising pick to me at the time. But the more I've thought about this, I think it just boils down to, hey, if we have a position, or if we're in a position to get a guy like Jonathan Taylor, of his talent, of his skill, forget about what you have coming back. Forget what you have on your team already. If you have a chance to get a player like that, you do it. I think back to Reggie Wayne in 2001. The Colts didn't need a wide receiver back then in the first round, but they still selected Reggie Wayne because he was the best player on the board. And I think the same kind of holds true here with Jonathan Taylor. And just sky's the limit with what he can do with this running game already, with a great offensive line and his resume that he's bringing with him from Wisconsin, and leading the NCAA in yards, and carrying the ball 924 times and still getting up and still being durable, and the yards after contact and all of that. He's just really excited to see what he can do in this offense with a great running game.
What's the I know you kind of look at it, and we know the Phillip Rivers situation coming in, but what's the situation with Jacob Eason? Is that if you look at that long term, and he comes in and is able to learn under Phillip Rivers for a couple of years, even if it's only 2 years or 3 years, hopefully, I see that as possibly 5 years down the road, that being the pick out of this draft that everybody's like, oh my gosh, the Colts stole one there.
Yeah, that could certainly be the case. And, Frank Reich and Chris Ballard after the draft, they made it pretty clear, Todd, that, hey, this guy first, before all of that, which I think could definitely be a possibility, but before all that, he's got to make our team. Because they were pretty open in saying, right now, Phillip Rivers is our starter. Jacoby Brissett, who we still like a lot, is going to be our backup quarterback. So they kind of squash any idea of trading Jacoby or him not being part of the plans now, with Jacob Eason being here. And then Jacob Eason and Chad Kelly are going to be duking it out in training camp and all off season to see who that number 3 quarterback is. So drafting a guy like that in the 4th round, it's very much, low risk, high reward. If it doesn't work out, it's not like you picked him. It's not like the Bears a couple years ago when they moved up to number 2 to draft Mitch Trubisky, and that just hasn't panned out just yet. So from that standpoint, it's not going to kill you. But just looking at him from a raw standpoint, kind of what he has tool-wise, he's got a bazooka for a right arm. Frank Reich talked about him having the strongest arm in college football last year among the quarterbacks coming out. He can make all the NFL throws, but it's just kind of everything else he has to work on. He has to work on, going through route concepts, footwork, being more accurate, that kind of thing. So I think he's coming into the perfect situation to work with Frank Reich and Nick Sirianni. Those 2 guys can help him out right away, get him incrementally better. I think he'll be a much better quarterback, at least in practice, at the midway point of the season next year than he will coming in the off season. It's one of those things where, maybe Phillip Rivers plays well to the point where he can get another contract for 2021. And then at that point, the Colts would have to make a decision on Jacoby Brissett. Does he stay? Does he go? And then after 2021, do the Colts hand the keys over to Jacob Eason? All of that is certainly in play. But what we know now is he's kind of in a fight for his, roster spot as a rookie coming out of Washington, where, listen, I thought he had a good college career, but the facts of the case is, he was a 4-year guy from a timeline standpoint, but he only started 2 years, and those were 2 years apart, and he didn't exactly set the world on fire at Washington last year. He had a good year, but not a great year. So This is still a work in progress. It's a chance the Colts are taking. And like I said, low risk, high reward, and I think the payoff could be there, but we'll have to wait and see.
Matt, we saw the uniqueness of a virtual draft this year, which seemed to go along with that pretty much without any major hitch. I didn't really see. I don't recall anything. So it seemed like it went pretty well. Probably saved some time and money for a lot of people.
Oh, it was great. It really was. And, I've read a lot of stuff on Roger Goodell saying it was the proudest moment of his tenure as commissioner of the league. And I don't think he was trying to give himself too much credit, but he was saying, I just thought we needed to proceed. I thought we needed to go on with this idea to give people a distraction of, give people some sort of, sports event, if you will, with all this pandemic going on. And there were some naysayers, but and I was kind of one of them in the sense that, well, I agreed that we should do the draft, but I was also kind of pessimistic on, well, I think this is going to be, I think there's going to be a lot of glitches in this thing, and it's going to, it's going to be rough. But to ESPN's credit, to the GM's credit, they kind of boned up on all this technology. They all became kind of their own IT guys. That became part of their preparation. And to your point, it went off without a hitch. I didn't see anything technical. They planned on using the pause button or giving teams more time if things went haywire with the technology. And I don't think that happened one time. So we did our broadcast remotely, just like ESPN and the NFL Network did. And again, we didn't have any problems. We prepped and we thought, what do we need to, what kind of redundancies do we need to have in place in order to make this work? So we crossed all those, boxes off, and everything just went great throughout the entire weekend. And I thought, if you ask the GMs, it was probably the most special draft they've been a part of, because you saw all the images and the videos of GMs drafting with their children on their lap, or high-fiving their wives when they're in the room. So, I mean, you just don't get that in a normal year. So I think it's really, really cool. And Roger Goodell has already talked about implementing some of the stuff they did virtually this year to future drafts when we get back to normal.
Yeah, one of the last year during the draft, that thing in Nashville, how many people showed up for that and how cool that whole situation was. I was like, man, this is going to be a flop. And I'll tell you, to me, it was the exact opposite. Like, I'll be so disappointed from now on when they don't have Zoom cameras or whatever in Bill Belichick's house, or in, just all the different places. Like, I'm telling you, I watched every draft that came across the board simply because I wanted to see what was happening next, what they were doing at this person's house. The players I thought were great. The reactions from the players and their families. I commented the first day, it was awesome how many of the guys were literally just sitting there with their moms and dads. And that was just a cool situation, I thought, to me, because, in a normal situation, there would be the whole posse would be there. Mm-hmm. But in this situation, I mean, just sitting there with the closest brothers and sisters and moms and dads and siblings and friends, and I couldn't have gotten more out of this. I thought it was awesome.
What was the receiver?
No, I totally agree. I totally agree. And just that first image of the draft with Joe Burrow, it's just sitting with his mom and dad. Like, in a normal year, how many people would be around the first overall pick? I mean, he had his entire draft, his entire senior class there, and everybody on the block would be over trying to squeeze their way into that living room. And another thing that I thought was really cool was, just to your point, Todd, seeing all the different GMs and coaches, but then seeing their surroundings, whether they were in their living room or kitchen or basement or whatever, and seeing their house take on kind of the personality that they have. It's like Cliff Kingsbury just sitting in, just this spacious living room out in the middle of the mountains in Arizona. I mean, that fits him. That's who he is. Same thing with Bill Belichick. I mean, Belichick's kitchen looks like my grandma's, like that kitchen table from 1967, nothing on the walls, just like a bare bones setup. I mean, that's just who Bill Belichick is. So I thought it was really cool to kind of peer into the lives and the personalities of their, work environments and their living spaces.
The $250 million yacht that Jerry Jones is
exactly. I mean, who else do you think it would draft from a yacht among the owners and stuff like that? So, yeah, it was really, really cool, and it was very basic. And I thought it was refreshing to see how simple and basic they made it, and they were still able to pull it off with everything going on.
I said I'm going to sit here. I'm going to watch the first 5 picks or whatever, and it took an hour and 15 minutes for the first 5 picks. And I was like, yeah, I can't see myself watching this for very long. And I watched every single one of them. Like number 30, number 32 came up on the board. I'm like, who's it going to be? Like I couldn't wait. It was a blast.
The last thing I remember hearing is them thanking us from like, what? It's over? I watched this whole draft. Are you kidding me? One of my favorite moments, though, was CeeDee Lamb when he got picked, and he had two different phones going, and his girlfriend sitting beside him. She took one of his phones out of his hand. He snatched that thing back so fast. Boy, he's like, oh, no, you ain't looking at that. Hell no.
It just shook his head. Yeah. No. How many memes are that going to be?
Well, I mean, it makes sense. I mean, I don't know if you guys have seen the numbers, but I mean, the first night drew like 19.6 million, up 37% first round from 19. And then overall for the weekend, it's up, I think, almost 20% for the entire weekend from 19 to 20. So it makes perfect sense because people are hunkered down and they got to stay inside. And plus, from a sports standpoint, that's the only game in town, literally. So it was just a very, very well-operated thing. And I thought it was cool, too. I mean, if you're in our field, you kind of pay attention to who's who, Daniel Jeremiah is an NFL Network guy and Rich Eisen is an NFL Network guy. Then, you got Mel Kiper's an ESPN guy. They blended all those guys together. And I thought if you didn't know that, you would never have known that it was a joint broadcast, right? Because everybody worked well together. There was no animosity, no bickering, anything like that. It was just a really, really fun weekend. I'm glad it's over because now we get to talk about, what's on the horizon here with the Colts. But from a broadcast standpoint and from an impact of getting good players, I thought it was a home run if you're a Colts fan.
Talk about just away from we're off the Colts now. Just some overall picks. You got Tua going to Miami, and then all the Joe Burrow is going to Cincinnati. Of course, he's from Ohio. Some cool backstory there. Just some cool storylines that came out of this draft.
I mean, Joe Burrow, I think he's going to be a really good pro. Now, I don't know if that's going to equate to immediate success with the Cincinnati Bengals. In reading some stuff going into the draft, they were talking about teams still being allotted, time to talk to the draft picks, about an hour a day with a certain prospect. And the Bengals, like 3 weeks in a row, just used all that time talking to Joe Burrow. Not just to get to know him and to feel him out and to figure out if he was going to be their choice, but they were actually going over the playbook, just getting him up to speed. Again, not knowing when they're going to see him face to face. They just decided to use all that time to go over plays and talk about scheme from a Cincinnati standpoint. But yeah, I mean, Tua going 5 was, it was up in the air heading into the night because of all the health questions surrounding him. But I mean, 15 players from the SEC in the first round is that's just a ridiculous number. You could argue the top 3 players are all Ohio State guys if you lump in Joe Burrow before he transferred. So that's obviously a huge feather in the Buckeyes cap. There's a handful of guys from Indiana, with Indiana ties that went. I know Stepaniak from IU went to the Packers. Locally here in Indianapolis, there's a kid named Jeremy Chin from Fishers who played at Southern Illinois. And he got drafted. I believe he went, I'm trying to think. I think he was the last pick in the second round. I can't remember off the top of my head who he went to, but I remember calling some of his high school football games up here in Indy with Fisher. So it just goes to show, guys, that it doesn't matter who you are or where you go. If you can play, modern times here in the NFL with all these scouts and YouTube and all this technology, they're going to find you. And so good for Jeremy Chin to go from, an FCS school and get drafted, in the second round. I mean, that's an unbelievable story. So it was a really, really fun weekend. And, all these different things are kind of monitoring top prospects, local guys, college guys here around the state of Indiana. And then certainly what the Colts were up to.
Well, obviously I'm a IU Hoosiers football fan first and foremost, but the second team I root for is the Georgia Bulldogs, and one of the names that I think will probably say more in the next 10 years than anyone that was drafted by the Colts is Rocket Rodrigo. I love that pick. I mean, the Colts have for so long had a great kicker, and they took the probably most high-profile kicker in all of college football in a free agent signing. Like, I love that pick, and I think that's the name we'll probably end up saying. You will definitely end up saying more in the next 10 years than all the other guys we drafted.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be interesting right now. I mean, the Colts are sort of like every other NFL team where, at some point you've got some unequal footing or uneven footing there with your franchise quarterback, and then who's going to be your kicker. And so that's kind of what the Colts are going through right now with Phillip Rivers. They think they're getting a quality player there, certainly with a guy that's, spent 16 years with the Chargers. But obviously Adam Vinatieri is a free agent and didn't have the season he wanted to last year, and is coming off an injury and had surgery as soon as the season was over. But then they also have a guy coming back from Illinois that was, signed immediately after the season was over to a reserve future contract. And then your guy, Todd, coming up from Georgia, I thought he thought he was going to get drafted. That didn't happen, which made him a very, very sought after undrafted free agent. And from what I've seen, he had a lot of offers and chose the Colts, and the Colts gave him a $20,000 signing bonus to come in right away to compete for that job. So it's going to be really, really fascinating to see who the Colts kicker is next year, because they've got some options, not to mention Adam Vinatieri, and the Colts still, at least publicly, saying they haven't made a call on him yet because they're trying to figure out where he is from a rehab standpoint. Listen, he's 47 years old, and like I said, the season just wasn't what he wanted to be last year. But you just don't cast off a guy like that immediately without going through, the process and seeing where he is both mentally and physically heading into the offseason.
Who was the last guy that played to that age? 47. I mean, I'm thinking, who was
anybody ever played to 47?
Well, there was another guy kicker. I can't think of his name. Back in like the 60s, he went to Kentucky. Obviously, daggone it. But I can't think of anyone who played that late other than him. I think he played in the 47.
I mean, 48. Whenever. I mean, it just seemed like the last couple of years, just suiting up, Adam Vinatieri was breaking records. I mean, every week it was like he's breaking a George Blanda record, or
George Blanda. That's who I was thinking. Yeah, right there.
So just with his participation, it was always most field goals attempt, or appearing in a game 47 years or older, that kind of thing. So there was always a milestone with Adam Vinatieri the last couple of years. So I think is it Blanda the guy you're thinking of?
Yeah, it was George, and I think he was like 48, maybe. I mean, so we're talking right there.
Yeah, I think Blanda does hold the record for oldest player in an NFL game, certainly oldest kicker, things like that. And I think that's why when Adam Vinatieri went on IR to end the season, and his last kick was blocked and returned for a touchdown against the Titans, and I don't think he has that surgery right away unless he has notions of coming back and trying to prove that last year was just not Adam Vinatieri, that he can get it done. I mean, he missed 6 PATs. I don't know what the number of missed kicks was last year, but it was certainly a career high. And so I just don't think he wants to go out like that. And I still think he has, eyes on, more records and more milestones. And I mean, he's got nothing to prove from a resume standpoint, but I mean, Adam is the fiercest competitor that I know. He hates to lose way more than he likes to win, kind of in line with the great quarterbacks that he's played with, and Tom Brady and Peyton Manning and Andrew Luck. So it would not shock me if he's going to come back next year. I don't know if that'll be with the Colts, considering the moves they made this offseason with, some free agent kickers. But it would not shock me if he plays in the NFL somewhere in 2020.
Yeah, George Blanda retired at 48, so he's knocking on the door. As soon as if he turns his birthday, he'll be up there. But, man, I cannot thank you enough for taking the time to join us, Matt. I know you're dealing with a new child and taking care of mom, of course. I hope they're both doing well during this time.
Yep, all's good. And, hey, before I go, can I give you guys some Don Fisher? Can I give you my Don Fisher impression?
We would be unbelievably hurt without it.
Hands it off right side to Chad Larry. Larry drives to the baseline. Little floater. He got it. And Chad Larry with his 22nd point of this ball game. And timeout on the floor. Kentucky wants to take a timeout. We'll step aside as Indiana leads the Wildcats 70-55. Back in a moment, this is Indiana University basketball from Learfield.
Best impersonation I've ever heard.
That is the best.
That's the best one I've ever heard.
It is the only one I've heard, because I was listening. You had some of the inflections on the words just perfect. I'm like, oh my gosh, he's a tough one. He's one of the toughest that I've ever heard to do, and that's actually one of the only ones I've heard that's even close.
Okay, hang on a second. So we know Fish did some preseason Colts football games.
Right.
Now what are you going to do? What's Matt Taylor do when Don Fisher retires in 10 years from now and they offer you that job? What's Matt Taylor going to do at that point?
Well, I'll be lying to you if I haven't thought about that my entire life.
Man, would you do the broadcasts in Don Fisher's voice?
Well, see, this is what I always said about Don, and he was a huge inspiration of mine, obviously, growing up in this market and being an IU guy, as you guys know that I am. He is incredibly cool, and he's been a big mentor of mine, professionally, getting to know him a little bit. And he's when you're able to do an impression of somebody, it just means that you're paying attention to them, and they're important to you enough to kind of mimic a little bit. And
sure.
That's what Don Fisher is to me, and he's incredibly cool about it. He doesn't get upset about it. I've done it, with him or around him, and he his funny story. When I got married, my brother reached out to him. He actually voiceovered and introduced my wedding party when we walked into our reception.
Oh man!
And everybody at the wedding thought it was me doing Don Fisher, but it was actually just Don, introing the wedding party. So he's a great friend. I've leaned on him for advice on stuff, and but the thing is, Don's still as good as he ever was, and he's not slowing down anytime soon, and I don't want him to slow down anytime soon. So, one of my favorite memories as a IU fan was listening to that IU and Duke game in the NCAA tournament with Utah when they played at Kentucky.
I try not to talk.
I think it was the Regents. I mean, that was just that's as good as it gets.
There's a lot of embarrassing things I said.
I love you, Don. I love you, Don.
The emotion just took over, and at that point, Fish was kind enough to just let me go on, and instead of grabbing me by the shirt and yanking me down and telling me not to make an idiot of myself. But he is, not only was he incredible to work with in the 8 years I did that, he's a better friend and a better human than I'll ever.
Without question. And he would send me, he would call and send me texts, a couple of years ago when I was, the interim guy, and he was very supportive when all that was going on. And that's just been kind of my thing. I've been able to just mimic people or do impressions of sportscasters because, as a young guy, when I was 10 years old, I knew exactly what I wanted to do. So I would just listen to games and watch games and learn how the pros did it. And so that's kind of how that started. It just started doing impressions of guy because I wanted to be like him.
You and Jake Query. You know Jake?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Jake. I mean, you and Jake Query could go out and sit and have beers and have conversations in voices that are not your own, and just go back and forth. Like the two of you are just amazing when it comes to doing those imitations and all.
We need to get a list, and so when we're running short on guests, we say, "Hey, all right, we need so and so and so and so. Give Matt and Jake a call."
I need you to be Don Fisher today.
Yeah. I mean, that's how it started. I mean, just all the local guys. Joe McConnell, who was another mentor of mine here locally. I could do him. And he's no longer with us, but I thought he's had more jobs than I've applied for. He's just so good. Did Major League Baseball, NBA, NFL, college football, major college basketball. So we've had a lot of really, really good guys, locally in Indianapolis, and then doing all the major college sports teams around the state that have been a big influence around here.
Yeah, I mean, the Indiana in general, but Indianapolis in that area, I mean, with Chris Denary and the Pacers broadcast, I mean, we have just been so fortunate and lucky. I mean, Purdue has had incredible announcers for years. I mean, I've always wanted to hate them, but when you meet them, they're just good guys. It's impossible to. And more, the city of Indianapolis and state of Indiana has really been blessed with announcers and people. I mean, the guy Lamy, who you took over for. I mean, what a great.
Yeah, I mean, I worked around with Bob for 8 years, and obviously he rubbed off on me big time. And what I took from Bob was just prep and always being ready to go in any situation. And I think another thing that's cool too is, we've got the Indianapolis Motor Speedway radio network up here. And, Jake's a part of that. And there's
Right.
just so many guys over the years that have brought that race and that event to life. When you think of people around here and, race day and Memorial Day weekend, like listening to the race on the radio is a huge part of that. Like it's
For sure.
It's just tradition. Then you've got great college programs. Ball State comes to mind. IU's got a great program. I went to Franklin College, which is a smaller school, but they've got a good program. So there's obviously influences for kids to get the itch, and then they go on to get great education, and then they just come right back into the market. So it's a really, really, it's not lost on me at all that I'm able to do this professionally in the market that I grew up in for a team that I grew up following. That's just the odds of that happening for me were just, 1,000,000 to 1, and I don't take it lightly at all.
Well, Matt, man, I cannot thank you enough for joining us as always. It is a blast every time you come on. So looking forward to doing it again already.
You got it. Anytime. I got all summer, so let's go. you got my number. Let's do it.
Well,
right. Thanks, buddy.
next time you get down to Eagle Point, play some golf with us. We're down here.
For sure.
Oh, would love that. Would love that for sure. Let's do it.
All right, brother. Matt Taylor joining us from Indianapolis. Thank you so much. We appreciate you.
All right, guys. Be good. Thanks.
See you, buddy.
Matt Taylor from Indianapolis Colts, of course, joining us talking about draft and everything other than that. It was just a fun conversation, man. This has been a blast all day today. Him and Mike DeCourcy together. What a blast.
Boy, you really came out of the week firing here on Monday. This is a big it's a fun show.
That's tough, man. Now I got a bar I got to keep coming up to every day. Boy, it's got to reach
Good
out.
luck.
But hopefully
Good
the next
luck.
few days are going to be beautiful outside. So get out and social distance, but get outside and do some stuff. But we'll look forward to it. A lot of got a great guest coming up this week on the program. Simon Stepanek is with us tomorrow, just drafted by the Green Bay Packers. Governor Kirk Haston going to be with us on Thursday. The governor.
Oh, boy.
And then Dr. Kyle Hornsby on Thursday. So we've got to set up all week, man. Looking forward to it. Hope everybody had a great time today. Looking forward to it. Make sure you go to thehoosier.com for complete coverage of the Indiana Hoosiers. For Todd and Jake, I'm Jim Coyle. Until tomorrow, I will see you on the radio.